The Songhai Empire was the third of the great empires in the medieval parts of western sub-Saharan Africa. The Songhai people came to dominate the eastern side of the Niger Bend. Eventually, they developed an empire that covered a vast portion of the western Sudan. In ancient times, several different groups of people combined to form the Songhai. Among the first people in the region of Gao were the Sorko, who established small settlements on the banks of the Niger River. They were specialists in everything that had to do with the river. They built boats and canoes from the wood of the Kaisidarat tree. The Sorko fished and hunted from their boats and provided water transportation for goods and people. A second group that moved into the area to take advantage of the Niger River's resources were hunters known as Go. They specialized in killing river animals such as the crocodile and hippopotamus. The other known group of the time was called the Do. They were farmers who raised crops in the fertile lands that bordered the river. Sometime before the 10th century, these early settlers were joined by a more powerful horse-riding people who spoke the Songhai language. These herdsmen established control over the other people in the area. All these people together gradually began to speak the language of the Songhai. The dominant Songhai horsemen became recognized as masters of the eastern arc of the Niger Bend. The history of how this happened is not clear. Historians will not even have known about the earliest dynasty of kings were it not for an ancient cemetery near a village called Sane near Gao. Inscriptions of a few of the tombstones indicate that the dynasty ruled in the late 11th and early 12th centuries, and that its kings had the title Malik, which means king in Arabic. Other tombstones mentioned a second dynasty whose rulers had the title Zua, but only myths and legends describe Zua's origins. The Arab chroniclers described a mythical figure named Zua Suleyman, who is variously described as an Arab from Yemen, a giant from the bush who could run as fast as giraffes and ostriches, or the killer of a monster fish god with a ring on its nose. Among the early people of the Niger Bend region were the camel-riding Sanhaja of the Sahara Desert. They were known locally as the Tuareg. They rode out of the Great Desert to establish trading camps near the Niger River. As time went on, northern African traders crossed the Saharan Desert and joined the Tuareg in their Niger Bend settlements. They all did businesses with the people living near the river. As the trade increased, the Songhai chiefs took control of the profitable commerce. They settled on the left bank of the Niger at a place that came to be known as Gao, which the Arab geographers called Gao. Between 750 and 950 Common Era, while the Ghana Empire was prospering as the land of gold far to the west, the trading center of Gao became an increasingly important southern endpoint for trade across the Saharan Desert. The trade goods included gold, salt, slaves, kola nuts, leather, dates, and ivory. By the 10th century, the Songhai chiefs had taken control of the peoples who lived along the trade routes. Gao was now a small kingdom. By around 1300 Common Era, Gao had become so prosperous that it attracted the attention of the Mali Empire's rulers and was conquered by them. Mali profited from Gao's trade and collected taxes from its kings until about the 1430s. But then troubles in the Mali homeland made it impossible for them to maintain control of the distant territories of the Niger Bend. As Mali was becoming weaker, powerful new leadership was rising in Gao. It was about this time that the Zua dynasty was replaced by a new line of rulers who had the title Si, short for Soni. In the 1430s, the Mali Empire withdrew from Timbuktu and Gao. The Si were then able to take complete control of their own kingdom. Around 1460, Si Suleyman Dema conquered Mema. This was a territory west of the inland delta that had been part of the Mali Empire for centuries. This shows that the Songhai will be able to take over some of the territories that once were on the fringes of the Mali Empire. When Suleyman Dema died in 1464, Ali Beeri became the next Sea of Gao and its surrounding lands. He is popularly known in historiography as Sunni Ali, the Conqueror. He was a very ambitious ruler and a military leader with endless energy who was constantly moving around leading his troops to hold off invaders and conquered new territory. Ali Beeri, where Beeri means the Great One in the Songhai language, had a large, well-provisioned and a disciplined army that included a cavalry. Whenever possible, Sunni Ali or Ali also used a fleet of river boats to transport his troops with Soroko crewmen under a naval commander known as the Hikoi. The river navy was very useful because many of Ali's military campaigns were in the territories bordering the Niger River. Once Ali had cleared the Gao kingdom of its most immediate dangers, he turned his attention to gaining control of the entire middle Niger. This included the rich gold and salt trade that passed through Timbuktu and Jenne. At the end of 1464, Ali Beeri arrived with his Songhai army across the river of Timbuktu's port of Kabara. The richest and most powerful Muslims of Timbuktu, which included religious officials, scholars, and wealthy merchants, had been cooperating with the Tuareg people. They all wanted to keep control of the city and keep the city out of Sunni Ali's hands. The Muslims were afraid that if Ali Beeri succeeded, he would take revenge on those who had died, who had sided with his enemies. So they prepared a caravan of hundreds of camels for their escape. They fled to Walata, an important commercial city in the Sahara Desert. In January 1464, Ali Beeri entered Timbuktu. As many had feared, he allowed his troops to loot and burn the city and kill many people. Ali's victory over Timbuktu was a milestone in his career as a successful military leader, although a cruel one. With that conquest, he took a major step in turning the small state of Gao into the Songhai Empire. After conquering Timbuktu, Ali continued to wage campaigns along the Niger River. He relied heavily on both his cavalry and his river fleet. The third most important city of the Niger Bend was Jenne, which was roughly 200 miles southwest upper river of Timbuktu. Jenne was the key city of the inland Niger Delta for several centuries, during the golden age of the Mali Empire and into the period of Songhai expansion. It is said to have been more famous than Timbuktu in medieval times because of the great amount of gold shipped from there to North Africa. Jenne enjoyed long periods of political independence. Jenne was located in the floodplains between the Bani and the Niger rivers. The entire city, along with some of its farms and cattle herds, were encircled by a high wall. Adding to Jenne's security was the fact that for much of the year, when the river was high, it was surrounded by water. Taking advantage of a high water season, Ali approached Jenne with his fleet of some 400 boats full of soldiers, but the city's defenders were courageous in their resistance, and Ali's troops found it impossible to get past the city walls. Instead, they circled the city and settled in for a siege, a military tactic in which a city is sealed off so that people, goods, and supplies cannot enter or leave. The aim is to starve the city's inhabitants into surrender. The exact date of Ali's attack on Jenne are not known, nor is it certain how long the siege lasted. According to legend, the siege was more than 7 years, but this is probably an exaggeration. According to descriptions written in the 17th century, Ali besieged Jenne for 4 years, which is probably closer to the truth. Eventually, the people of Jenne grew weak from famine and agreed to surrender to Ali. When they rode out to meet their conqueror, Ali was astonished to see how young the chief of Jenne was. Ali asked if he had been fighting a boy all those years. He was told the young man's father had died during the siege and the son had become the ruler of Jenne. Ali married the boy's mother and sent her to Gao with rich gifts. See Ali Beeri then set his sights on Walata, the city to which the Muslims fled when he attacked Timbuktu. See Ali depended on his riverboats so much that he wanted to use them for the campaign against Walata, even though it was far out in the Sahel where there were no natural waterways. So see Ali's laborers began digging a canal from the town of Ras El Ma at the western end of Lake Faguebin. From there it was 120 miles more to Walata. After see Ali's laborers began digging the canal, he heard that the Mosi ruler of the kingdom of Yatinga in today's Burkina Faso was on the way to attack him. See Ali abandoned the canal project, marched his army against the Moshi and defeated them. He never did return to the canal project and the conquest of Walata. See Ali won every battle he fought and conquered every territory he invaded. Thus, Sunni Ali or See Ali can be considered one of the great conquerors of the world. Although the territory he conquered was not as vast as the likes of Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great, he is one of the few military leaders in world history who never lost a battle or failed to conquer a territory he set his sights on. Although, as stated in the Tarikh Sudan, he was a cruel leader and conqueror, his military campaigns set the precedent towards the establishment of the great empire of the Songhai. It is believed that he was the only ruler ever to defeat the people of Jenne. The more territory he captured, the more he had to keep traveling to defend and administer his increasingly large empire. The newly conquered people frequently rebelled, and hostile neighbors constantly raided the territory now controlled by the Songhai. Perhaps this is because Sunni Ali didn't take his time to establish extensive administration and bureaucracy for ruling his empire as compared to the Mali Empire. In 1492, after holding power for 28 years, See Ali Beeri the Conqueror died while returning home from another military campaign. He was followed by his son, See Baru. Baru only ruled for 5 months before he was pushed out by a stronger leader named Askia Muhammad the Great. If you enjoyed the video, like and comment on the channel's videos, and if you are new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.